Ever pondered about insects as potential tools of mass destruction? Picture those buzzing insects that share our 1960s space, once shrouded in a clandestine military project. Today, we bring forth a chilling episode from the recorded timeline of U.S. military history. It's a narrative where tanks and guns take a back seat, and swarms of fleas take the center stage. This isn't an idea snatched from the realm of a dystopian novel. Rather, this is a tangible, albeit concealed, event from the Cold War era, the swinging 60s. An experiment conducted not on an alien battlefield, but right here on our very own American soil. A bold exploration that transcended the confines of traditional warfare, blurring the borders between science and the eerie. Excited? You ought to be, because this is the chronicle of Big Itch, an operation that witnessed the U.S. military probing into the frightful capabilities of insects in biological warfare. Fasten your seatbelts as we delve into the bone-chilling history of insect warfare experimented on oblivious U.S. citizens. Let's roll your uploaded clips and step back into the 1960s. In the midst of the Cold War, a secretive project dubbed Big Itch took flight. The mid-20th century, a time of heightened tensions and clandestine operations, saw the U.S. military delve into uncharted territories of warfare. Their objective? A chilling foray into the world of insects, specifically fleas, to test their potential as carriers of destruction in biological warfare. Big Itch had a simple yet terrifying premise. Could these minute creatures, usually no more than nuisances to mankind, be effectively harnessed to spread diseases among enemy ranks? But this wasn't some far-flung battlefield or an isolated laboratory. This experiment was conducted right here, under the expansive skies and desolate stretches of the Utah desert. The military's objective was as audacious as it was alarming. They sought to unleash swarms of fleas, not just any fleas, but Xenopsilla chiopus, better known as the rat flea. These tiny creatures, notorious for their disease-carrying capabilities, were to be the test subjects of this covert operation. The plan was to study their dispersion patterns and survival rates once released into the wild. But this operation was not without its risks. The Utah desert, while isolated, was not completely devoid of life. The area chosen for the release was close to regions where plague was endemic in wild rodents. There were legitimate concerns about unintentional plague outbreaks, a terrifying prospect in itself. Despite these risks, the operation proceeded. Fleas were loaded into special munitions and cast into the desert winds, their fate left to the whims of nature and the watchful eyes of military scientists. The stage was set for an experiment that could change the rules of warfare. The question was, would Big Itch prove to be a groundbreaking success or a catastrophic misstep? The answer, as we'll soon discover, was as intriguing as it was disturbing. The operation, carried out in the Utah desert, involved an unlikely weapon, the rat flea. This creature, Xenopsilla chiopus in scientific parlance, isn't your garden variety flea. It's a notorious carrier of diseases, including the infamous plague. The choice of the rat flea wasn't accidental. It was a calculated move, considering the flea's potential to wreak havoc on a population. The military's objective was clear: to study the dispersion patterns and survival of these fleas post-release. To achieve this, they loaded the fleas into specially designed munitions. These were not your typical bombs or missiles, but rather containers designed to protect the fleas during their aerial journey, ensuring they landed on the ground unharmed and ready to find a host. The operation, aptly named Big Itch, was meticulously planned and executed. The fleas were dropped from an aircraft, scattering across the testing grounds. The idea was to observe how these tiny creatures dispersed upon impact, how they survived, and if they could latch onto hosts. But every experiment comes with its own set of perils. Big Itch was no exception. There were inherent risks, and the chosen location for the experiment only amplified these concerns. The Dugway Proving Ground in Utah, where the fleas were released, was dangerously close to regions where plague was endemic in wild rodents. This proximity raised the alarming possibility of unintentional plague outbreaks, a risk the military was willing to take in the name of scientific advancement and warfare strategy. The experiment was not a one-off event. It was a series of tests, each one meticulously documented and analyzed. The military was not only interested in the fleas' initial dispersal and survival, but also their longevity in the field. How long would these fleas survive without a host? Could they endure the harsh desert environment? As the operation unfolded, the military watched, recorded, and analyzed. Each drop of the flea-loaded munitions, each dispersal pattern observed, and each survival rate calculated was a piece of the jigsaw puzzle they were trying to complete. They were not merely conducting an experiment, they were crafting a potential biological weapon, a weapon that could change the face of warfare. Yet despite the meticulous planning and execution, Big Itch was a gamble. The experiment was conducted on home soil, using a creature known to carry deadly diseases in an area close to plague-ridden rodents. It was a risk-filled venture, teetering on the edge of a potential disaster. But it was a risk the military was willing to take, all in the name of gaining a potential upper hand in warfare. With the conclusion of the test, it was time to assess the results. The results of Big Itch were as alarming as they were informative. The fleas, against all odds, survived the drop from the sky and managed to attach themselves to hosts, proving the disturbing concept that insects could indeed be weaponized to carry diseases. This was a breakthrough in biological warfare tactics, but it was a chilling one. The concept of sending disease-ridden insects into enemy territory, while potentially effective, was deeply unsettling. The fleas demonstrated an unexpected resilience, remaining active for less than a day unless they found a host or were protected in some way. This showed that while they could be a viable weapon, there were also limitations. Their short active period meant timing and location of release would be critical to the success of such a biological attack. Yet, the most alarming finding was the widespread distribution of the sponge carriers used to house the fleas. These carriers were found far and wide, suggesting that the fleas could potentially spread over a vast area. This raised the terrifying possibility of an uncontrollable spread of disease, reaching far beyond the intended target. The Big Itch test also underscored the unpredictability of biological warfare. Despite meticulous planning, the military could not control all the variables. There was the risk of the diseases spreading unintentionally, potentially causing an epidemic among their own population. The fleas could also potentially disrupt local ecosystems, causing unforeseen environmental damage. The experiment had been successful, but it was not without its concerns. The potential for disaster was high, and the ethical implications of such a weapon were deeply troubling. The military had proven that insects could be used as biological weapons, but at what cost? The Big Itch experiment was a testament to human ingenuity, but it was also a stark reminder of the lengths we are willing to go in the name of warfare. And it raises the question, just because we can do something, does it mean we should? Despite the experiment's success, it raised significant ethical and environmental questions. The very thought of weaponizing insects for warfare was laden with grim implications. It wasn't just the military targets who were at risk. Civilian populations could easily have been caught in the crossfire. Entire ecosystems could have been disrupted with potentially devastating effects on the balance of nature. Moreover, the risk of unintended consequences was high and daunting. What if these insects ended up triggering an epidemic? A plague outbreak, for instance, could have resulted in widespread illness and death, extending far beyond the initial target area. The experiment had demonstrated the feasibility of such a scenario, but at what cost? Every step forward in this chilling project was a dance on the razor's edge, a potential catastrophe awaiting a single misstep. The potential for disaster was a stark reminder of the dangerous game being played. Big Itch remains a controversial chapter in military history, a stark reminder of the lengths to which man is willing to go in the name of power and control. This covert operation, conducted on home soil, pushed the boundaries of ethical military experimentation, shedding light on the unpredictable and potentially catastrophic nature of biological warfare agents. The use of fleas, seemingly insignificant creatures, as potential carriers of disease is a chilling testament to the depths of military strategy. But it's not just about the strategy, it's also about the potential fallout. Imagine for a moment the unintended consequences of such an operation. A plague outbreak, devastation of local ecosystems, the risk to innocent civilians. the stakes were incredibly high. Today, experimentation of weaponizing insects continues. New patients on improved methods for delivering toxic mosquitoes have been published as recently as 2016. There needs to be oversight or public acknowledgement and accountability. In November of 2023, the Biden administration provided its plan to release man-eating grizzly bear on a population in Washington state.